In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to set up your Sony camera if you're a hybrid shooter, meaning that you shoot both photo and video. The goal will hopefully be to have everything organized and customized so that you can control this thing like a musical instrument with your eyes closed. Be prepared for every scenario and to not miss the shot. So first of all, before you switch the camera on, you're going to want to have a battery fully charged, a card in the camera, and your lens that has the widest aperture that is electronically connected to the camera body, so no vintage lenses, I'm afraid. The reason why you need to have your widest possible aperture lens on while we're setting the settings is because when we save certain settings, if you save the settings with an f4 lens on, for example, next time you put an f1.8 lens on the body, for example, the aperture of that lens will be made f4 by the camera by default. Yes, you could then just change down to f1.8, but that will get a little annoying, trust me. You'll be saving time on a shoot, and why would you settle for making your life more difficult? Vice versa, having an f1.8 lens on while we're saving the settings, the camera will default to going down to f1.8 or the lowest aperture that your lens will allow you to go down to. Also, make sure that the master dial is set to movie mode, which is the little film strip, and your exposure compensation is set to 0. So the goal for this setup will be to have movie mode set up for dialing in specifics on a video shoot. Manual mode will be our settings for a photo shoot. Number 1 on the dial, not to be mistaken with C1 button, will be set to either 60 FPS or 50 FPS as I'm in the UK, or 4K 24, again 25 in the UK. Number 2 on the dial will be 1080p 120 frames per second, which is 100 frames per second in the UK. C1, C2, C3 and C4 along with a bunch of other buttons are also fully customizable, but I'll show you how you can do all of that a little later on. Okay, so now that's all out of the way, I think we're ready to switch the camera on. First thing you want to do is to make sure that your camera is set up in the right region. For me, it's PAL. If you're watching this in the US, for example, you'll want to switch that to NTSC. So to do that, go to the 5th icon along, which is the suitcase icon, page 2 of 7, 4th one down, select NTSC/PAL selector. Choose your region. Again, for me it's PAL. Next you want to format the card, so go to the last icon, which is the star icon, first page, second one down, format. This will delete everything on the card, but presumably you already know about that. Okay, so now we're ready to go ahead and really start customizing the setup. So on the first menu, change the aspect ratio to 16:9. Ignoring page 2. Moving on to page 3, we're going to be coming back to this memory setting later on, as that's how we're going to be saving some of our settings. Skipping page 4 and moving to page 5. Set focus mode to continuous. Priority set in AFS is balanced emphasis, as is priority set AFC. Focus area is zone, and that's it for that page. Page 6, 7 and 8. Everything should be default as seen here. Page 9, you can set ISO to 100 for now. Page 10, 11 we'll leave as default. White balance, you want to always do a custom white balance, but for the sake of this video I'm setting this to auto, and you'll see why later on. Creative style I have set to neutral for when I don't want to use a picture profile, and a picture profile overrides creative style, so when I switch a PP on, creative styles gets turned off by default. When I switch PP off, the creative style automatically resumes. Page 13, I have peaking switched on and set to high, colour yellow. Okay, so moving ahead to the second icon, page 1. So exposure mode, this is where people tend to get really confused because they don't seem to have any control over the aperture, ISO or shutter speed. And that's normally because they don't have manual exposure selected. So do make sure that you have manual exposure selected here. File format, set that to xavcs 4K and have 25p 100mm selected also. If you are in an NTSC region, then you'll have 24p as an option instead to select. Page 2 and 3, these should be default for you too. Page 4, turn steady shot on. Page 5, I have clear image zoom switched on. Page 6, if you want zebras to be switched on, then there they are, go for it. Grid line is set to rule of thirds. Page 7, we won't worry ourselves over. Page 8, okay, so this is where we set our custom buttons or custom key. I use very similar custom keys for photo and video. For photo custom keys, which is the top one, you can see my photo custom buttons. To set these, you simply click on one, the control wheel for example, go through the menu, and from there you can determine what function this controls. Not only do you have these controls, you also have 2 more pages of custom buttons to assign. There are some here that I don't worry about, but like many of the settings on this camera, it's nice to know that they're there if I ever need them. Going back to the last page, in the camera menu at least, these are all being left as default. So now that everything is set up the way we may need it, all we're going to do is press the menu button over here to give us the live view mode. We're going to make sure that our shutter speed is set to 1/50, that's double our frame rate. Our aperture is the lowest it can go on our most wide open lens that is electronically connected to the camera, so that's f1.8 for me. Lastly, our ISO is set to 100. So if I wanted to switch on a picture profile, then it would still default to being the lowest ISO for PP. S-Log2 would have a lowest ISO of 800 for example. Press the menu button to come out of live view. Go up and across to the first icon, scroll across to page 3, scroll down to memory settings, make sure that all of these settings are correct and press the center button. This will assign all of those settings to number 1 on the dial. Now for 100p recording, go back to the menu and change movie recording to 1080p, 100 frames per second. Again, if you're in NTSC region, then this will say 120 frames per second. Go back to live view, change the shutter speed to double the frame rate, so 1/200. Go back to the menu, memory settings, number 2, and center button to assign. Now turn your dial to M, and in the menu on the first icon, make sure that the file format is RAW. Make sure that the RAW file type is uncompressed, And if you want, you can change the aspect ratio back to 3:2. Something else worth mentioning is that I also have autofocus with shutter switched on. That can be found on icon 1, page 6, right at the bottom. And there we have it. We just ventured through all of Sony's photo and video menus. Hopefully you managed to follow along with all of that, and hopefully I haven't just bored you to death either. I know it's a lot to take in, but once you know the Sony menu system, they're very much the same on all of their range. So there we are. If you like the video, then don't forget to give it a like. It really helps me beat the YouTube algorithm. Comment and let me know if there's anything important that I missed. Finally, subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated with all of my future uploads. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.